Hey everybody, On the Run with Beards and Dunn is back for another episode, and we actually have the Beards with us.
Dunn,
Beards,
I'm back in the saddle again.
Well, bring us up to speed. You know, Rod DeHaven was so gracious and helped us out last week. I had a great chit chat with him, and Rod is just amazing athlete. You know, when you think of his
No kidding.
You know, when I talked to him about his range, he ran a 148-800. That's 2 second quarters back to back. I couldn't do one of those in my prime by itself, let alone two of them. And then all the way to a 2:11 marathon and all kinds of races in between. And so we had a great time, and we both missed you. It's too bad you couldn't be here. Where were you, by the way?
Oh man, Don, this has been an ordeal. So, you know, it's gone back since the end of July. You know, I got this infection in my left knee replacement, and I've had 4 surgeries. So on the 29th of September, it was looking bad. So I contacted my local doctor, and then they contacted this specialist orthopedic in Fargo, and they said, get over here. So I get over there. I was in the hospital for, gosh dang, 12 days on heavy-duty antibiotics. And just recently, this past Monday, they went in there and cleaned it all out again. And now I've got I've got a PICC line in. I'm giving myself these heavy-duty antibiotics for 3 weeks. And done. I had like 4 different doctors over there saying 4 different things what they're going to do. Well, the main surgeon was in Hawaii, but they were sending him pictures, keeping him updated. So the middle of last week, I got a doctor came in. He says, "Yep, you've got infection in the joint, so it's going to have to come out, the old knee." So mentally, I got myself all ready to do that.
Dialed it in, yeah.
Dialed it in. Well, then a few days later, they came and they go, "Well, now we're not so sure if we're going to do that." So now I'm sitting in limbo. So this past Monday morning, they wheeled me. I'm the first one on the OR that morning at 7 o'clock. So the doc comes in. I go, "Doc," I go, "what's going on?" I said, "Are you pulling this stuff out?" He goes, "Well, Dick," he goes, "I tell you, you know, you've already had 2 knee replacements there." He goes, "Doing this third one," he said, "I could pull it out, but it is major, big-time surgery." He said, "We're going to see if we can try this one more time. I'm going to go in there, clean everything out, sew it back up, put a what do they call it? Wound vac. Wound vac on there, and put you on heavy-duty antibiotics for 3 weeks. We'll see how it looks after that, and then hopefully this will take care of it. If not, then they'll probably have to take it out. But done. I was in the hospital for, gosh dang, 12 days. I was going crazy.
That's putting you in a cage.
And done. So when I was there, you know, I didn't shave. So
yeah, I noticed that.
It's hard to see if people are watching on YouTube because I got a beard, but it's gray.
It's white. You know, it's transparent.
Yeah. Well, you know, I grew a beard back in 1981. In fact, when I ran the Houston Marathon in 1981, I had a beard. But it was ugly. It was red and brown, and it just looked terrible. Well, now it's not even gray. It's like silver.
Well, welcome to the club, buddy. Look at my stash. I haven't shaved. You know, being retired. You know, and in case anybody was wondering, I've had a few people say, "Hey, Mike, how you liking retirement?" The only way I can describe it is every night feels like Friday night to me. And every morning, every day feels like Saturday to me.
I love it.
I do. You know, I don't know about you guys, but I love Friday night. Friday night is like, woohoo, you know, it's Friday night. Let's have fun.
Sure.
You know, you don't have to worry about work for a couple days. You don't even think about it. And then Saturday, you know, that's a fun day. You can do all the stuff you want to get done. And then Sunday, I always say Monday, poison Sunday. You know, that's an old saying. Every day, every night's Friday night, and every day Saturday. And so I'm loving it. I'm loving it. We did a 30-day road trip, and you know all about that.
Well,
anyway, it's so good to have you back, bud.
Oh, Don, believe me, it feels good to be back, and and a big thanks out to Rod DeHaven too for filling in last week, and I can't wait to. I'm going to listen to the podcast. I'm heading out to South Dakota fishing on Sunday, and so I can't wait to listen on my way out there.
Oh, cool. Oh, he did a great job. He did a great job. Well, last time you and I chit-chatted, we just did the hour run together. And, you know, that's one of the highlights of my running career, in all honesty. People always, you kind of wonder, what was your best race you ever, you'd like to say, well, my marathon PR, that was a great race for me. Or, you have races that you really felt like really you nailed it. You can be thinking, because I'm going to ask you here when I'm done yapping, if one race comes to mind where you feel like, man, I nailed that one. I know you always knew there was a better one in the bag, you felt like.
I always felt like there was.
Well, that hour run for me, as a high school kid, I dreamt of running a 5-minute mile. And, and then you do it, and it's so exciting, and all the year, it's a lot of work to get to that kind of fitness.
Oh, yeah.
And then to be able to do an hour run, and even though I came up 80 yards short of 12 miles.
It's so close.
It's so close. It came out to like 5:01 a mile.
Right.
For 11 miles short, 12 miles short, 80 yards. And so I kind of thought, man, that for me was kind of one of my better performances ever. It also was very, what's the word? It really grounded me too, in that the realization that Beards, to be a world-class marathoner as yourself, you got to be able to go out and do. Well, back in those days, if you could do 5-minute miles for 26 miles,
right,
that's a 2:11:07 approximately
exactly.
Marathon. And that's world class. You can what's world class, what's national class, what's regional class, whatever. And I kind of was touching on that regional, trying to break into the national class. I think you had to get around about 215 to consider yourself a national. Maybe sub 220. Sub 220 back in the day was.
Oh yeah, that was a big
respectable.
deal.
Yeah, it was. Everybody was kind of, that was the goal and stuff.
Right.
But if you're gonna do this as a living, 211 or better.
Yep.
In my mind, people
right.
can argue that, all day long if you want to. In that race, when I did 12 of them, I have to be honest with you, Beards, there wasn't a lot left in the tank, and now I know you ran that race, and in your log, you said I hate to say, you said I ran easy. Well, for you, you weren't killing yourself. You were under control, totally aerobic.
The neat thing about that race is, and that's, once I got out of college, I never ran any track races really. But, the nice thing about running on a track is you get in that rhythm.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And there's no hills. There might have been a little wind, but then you get it on the backside. At your back.
You, yeah.
And you get in that rhythm, and it just it had happened to me in other races, road races too. When you get in that rhythm, and it seems, I'm not saying it was easy, but it felt like I was running 6-minute pace or something.
I see it in cycling too. Sometimes we call it, and maybe runners, you call it, you're in the zone.
Right.
Basketball guys get in the zone where they can't miss, and stuff. You get in the zone, and that zone's a pretty sweet spot where you're putting in that effort that should hurt a lot more than it actually is, because you're, quote, in the zone sort of thing. And I did find I put that up on our, I think I put it up on our site, and I did. I put a little blog on our Facebook site, my splits. I never ran a faster quarter during that event than a 73, and I never ran a slower quarter than 77.
Well, I tell you, that's right.
That's but I know if we looked at yours, I think you were probably 73 to 74, 73, 74, 73, 70, maybe you threw in a few 75s, because you ended up averaging 74 seconds per quarter.
Yeah.
For 48 quarters. Now, the new world record, I just saw this on YouTube or on Facebook. If you take, I can't remember the guy's name, Kipto? Or am I saying that?
It's Kelvin Kiptum.
Kiptum. If you broke it down to 104 laps on a 400-meter track, because that's what a marathon works out, 26.2, it's 68.4
oh my gosh,
per 400 meters. So, I know, Beards, in your day, you could have knocked out 68-second quarters, I think, for a 10K.
Probably.
I don't have any doubt you could have done it. But when you think about a marathon, 104 laps at 68-second pace, never taking a break, just knocking them out. 68.
Well,
and
done.
Yeah.
Well, before we end the podcast today, we'll get into talking a little bit about this Kelvin Kiptum.
Yeah, well, I don't think, and that's going to be around for a long time, because the shoes, with this, if you're saying 4 or 5 up to 6% efficiency savings or energy return,
that's huge.
It's 4 minutes for a world-class marathoner. And I'm not taking anything away from this dude. Bless his heart, everybody else has the shoes on too, and they couldn't beat him. But, it is kind of sad. when you try to compare eras.
It's,
Because you
it's
can't do it.
It's apples to oranges.
It is. Well, anyway, so we finished up that hour run, and I was on a roll. I mean, I was racing about every weekend, and I think you had been too. And then I think after that hour run, I know my focus changed because I was going to run the Black Hills Marathon in September. So that, and I knew that after the hour run. I think it was about 2 weeks later. What was your thoughts after the hour run? What did you have on your agenda?
Well, so I was going to go back, and I did. In September, I went back and ran the Heart of Thunder Bay half marathon.
I was there with you.
Yeah, because I won it in 81 and then
Yes.
went back in 82. But, Dun, so after the hour run in Brookings, I started having my left Achilles started kind of giving me a little grief and whatnot. And so, when you're young, you just kind of run through that stuff. No big deal and everything. So I remember I went up to the Heart of Thunder Bay, ran there, and I remember I'd come down with a bad cold.
I put this on our site, and I don't know if you have a chance to go look at it. Dear Beers, when you have a few minutes, go to our site.
I will.
And go under extras. And have a photo of you coming into the finish that I think either Karen took with one of our old Instamatic cameras.
Yeah.
So you're not totally framed, but I remember because I ran the 10K because they wanted me to run the half marathon because we got invited. I don't know if you had anything to do with it, but it was 2 weeks after Black Hills Marathon, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I went up there and they said, well, if we're going to bring you in, we want you to run the half marathon. I said, look, I just ran a marathon 2 weeks ago. I love to come, but I want to run the 10K. And they were like, okay. And Gary Bjorklund was in the 10K, and they had some good guys. And I, because I thought, man, my legs, I wasn't ready for a half marathon. Well, anyway, there's a picture of you coming in, but just to knock, I was there with you guys. Mary was there. Karen was there. We had a great time. And you did have I mentioned, Beards had a bad head cold, and you were snotting up phlegm and stuff like that. And, a lot of guys would have bailed. I think a lot of guys would have said, look, I got a head cold. I'm sick. I'm not going to, I'll shoot the gun. I'll help you hand out awards, and stuff. But I don't know if there was some money on the line. And
No, I had thought about it because I really was not feeling good.
No.
But, the folks in Thunder Bay had always treated me so good. And, I committed to running the half marathon, and I thought, what the heck?
You didn't want to let them down.
Yeah, I didn't want to let them down.
Well, you took off, and I was kind of getting ready for the 10K. The half marathoners took off, and they had a helicopter, and we could kind of see where you were based on, it's like pro cycling. The helicopters usually following the lead path.
Sure.
And we could see this dang helicopter circling out in the countryside, wherever they ran you guys. And all at once it started heading back into town. And who's the first guy back but the Beards? And I was thinking like, whoa. And I remember you looked like you were working.
Well, there was an Irish guy. I can't think of his name.
And wasn't there a guy named for Canada from like Art Boloy?
Yeah, he was in it, I think.
He was tough.
But there was an Irishman that they'd brought in. And him and I were duking it out for like 8, 9, 10 miles.
You got away from him somewhere out there.
I got away from him, but
and
I had to work.
You were well, if you look at our site, you'll see a picture, and the look on your face isn't one of relaxation and enjoyment. It's like, I'm getting this. You were working hard, and I got a quick snapshot. I think Karen grabbed a shot of me at the start, which is probably the best I looked that whole race, running next to Mike Palmquist. And Mike and I are running side by side, and it's a cool shot. But that was so much fun, and so that was your next race after that hour run was.
Okay. And
so
that was a big race back then.
It was. Oh, it was. They brought in, like I said, I came in. They brought, if I remember right, Brooks paid my expenses. Karen and I, our car was so beat up. We rented a car, and Brooks paid for the rental car. I think it was part of my deal. I got so much travel expense.
Sure.
And back in those days, car rental wasn't like it is today.
No.
Because now it's like, man, you better go to the bank first.
Oh, no kidding.
It was like $150 for a week, and so we rented a car and drove up to Thunder Bay with you guys. So I ran the Black Hills Marathon, though, and so the week, about 2 weeks after our hour run and 2 weeks before Thunder Bay. And
that was on your docket before the hour run.
Yeah, I had kind of planned on it, and they had they had a new race director. The year I won it in 79, this is now 82. It's 3 years later. The fourth race since I'd won it. And they had a new race director. Larry Simonson was his name. Nice guy. And I really wanted to run it, but I also had Twin Cities Marathon on my mind.
Yeah.
And that was going to be a month after Black Hills. And I was kind of weighing, should I wait till Twin Cities? But I like the Black Hills race. And he said, Mike, if you come out here, I'll give you $300, room and board, and free entry. And I thought, and I put on their website, I have a picture, and I said, it's the only race I ever got paid to run. And so, I guess I could say I was a professional runner if I...
Right, absolutely.
You couldn't admit it then because you'd lose your amateur status.
Yes.
And believe you me, that $300, well, they may have paid my motel room and my entry fee, but I had to drive out there. They didn't pay the gas came out of that $300.
Right.
Meals on the way. Anyway, so yeah, it wasn't like you're swimming in dough buying yachts or anything like that.
Exactly.
So I went out there and it was a pretty good, back in the day, a Black Hills Marathon had a reputation of being a fast course because it was mostly downhill. And like we talked about a few episodes ago, but most of the downhill came in 1 mile outside of Rapid City by the fish hatchery where you drop from 4,000 feet down to 3,000 feet in like a mile.
Was I out there in 82 when you ran it?
You and I did the radio in that like in 84, 85.
Okay.
But it was kind of cool. So I got race number 1 because I had the course record still.
Well, yeah.
And I don't think any other defending champ had ever come back. But Rob Kinnunen came out, and Rob was a heck of a runner. Rob was a competitor. He and I duked it out all through college, and on the roads, I know he beat me at the Brandon 20K right before this race. We were together till about the last 200 meters, and man, I tried putting a move on him with about an 800 to go because I didn't want to sprint with him. I thought I could break him before the track. We finished on a track in Brandon. And so I made a move with about 800 to go, a hard move. I put all my eggs in one basket. I couldn't drop him. And when we hit the track, he had one more gear left. He beat me by 10 seconds in the last 200 meters. He was sprinting and I was like, I'm not.
It happens.
It happens. And he ran 103.50 and I ran 104 flat for 20K and that's okay. But then at the hour run, I turned it around and beat him there.
Right.
And so he shows up for the Black Hills Marathon and I'm thinking, all right, Rob and I are going to have a duel. And then a bunch of guys like Jim Glazer from Black Hill State.
I remember
was
Jim.
There. Jerry, the guy who was up finished second was a good kid out of Nebraska, and his name escapes me, but it's on our race results there. In fact, I think Ben just put it up on our screen. If you're on YouTube, you might be. Let me click on that. Gerald Zukowski, I think was his name. Well, there was a bunch of good guys. And so I thought, well, unlike 1979 when I kind of had the race all to myself, this time that ain't going to happen, and it didn't. We took off, same course I'd run 4 years earlier or 3 years earlier, and there was a group of us, and we stuck together through about 5 miles for sure.
Now, what kind of splits were you running early on?
It was pretty relaxed. In that, I'm bringing them up here so I can try to read them. We went through the first 5 miles. It says 5:27 per mile pace. So not killing it, not going super hard. And then I think the next 5 miles. In fact, if I can get it back on here, Ben. I put the hammer down because it's kind of like you, Beards, where you go, this pack is too big.
Right.
You got 4 or 5 or 6 guys all kind of moving around, trying not to lead and all this. And there it is. And I can't quite make it out. But the next 5 miles, I dropped it down to 5:14 a mile.
Oh, that'll hurt people.
And the next 5 miles was 5:11 a mile. And then the next 5 miles were 5:12 pace per mile. So for those 15 miles from 5 to 15, that's only 10 miles.
5 to
20. It was 5, average around 5:12 pace.
You were hammering.
Yeah, I got away from everybody. And Rob, I dropped him on that from 5 to 10 miles on an uphill section, and he had a bad knee. He had kind of had a chronic knee tendonitis, like all the runners tend to have, and he ended up not finishing. And I was thinking Rod was going to, when you're running, you're always, Beards, you got the thing of looking behind you. You just think, they're going to come back. And one of the biggest, happiest moments of my life is when I saw Rob Kinnunen driving by in a car with his head hanging out the window going, "Hey, Mike, you're looking great. Keep up the good work." And I'm thinking, Rob? It's like I didn't know he'd fall. So I'm thinking, okay, that's one less guy I got to worry about, And so everything was going great. I was running pretty good. And then we got to downtown. And I tell you, Beards, after you come down that big downhill.
Oh, outside, I can't even imagine.
You hit the flat. And it feels like you're running uphill.
It's got to.
It's that eccentric contraction that you're doing, absorbing the shock as you're running downhill, it just taxes your muscles. And I got to West Boulevard, and it was the last uphill of the race, and I remember it might as well have been a mountain. It was probably like a block of like shallow uphill, sort of thing. At that point, any uphill doesn't look like a good idea.
No.
And I think it says here I ran for the last 10K 5:46 pace. So I might have been averaging, like 5:15s for the first 20. But the last 10K was not a pretty sight. Ended up winning in 2:21:08. And so can't complain. It was great. Had a great time. My mom and dad were there. Karen, was there. It was a big celebration. We spent the night out at my folks' cabin and had a great time. And so that was cool. And then 2 weeks later, I went up to Thunder Bay, did the 10K with you. That was just, Beards, whenever we got to go do races together, or even though we didn't run the same race. Oh, we always had a good time. No matter how the race was going to end out, we'll still enjoy each other's company and, with our wives and all that sort of stuff. It was a lot of fun. And then
John, do you remember what you ran the 10K up at Thunder Bay?
Oh, do I have to admit it? 32:10. I looked it up. And so, Beards, 2 weeks after a marathon.
Well, and especially that marathon.
Which I pounded my...
People don't realize that mile that Mike's talking about, that downhill, it is brutal.
It is brutal. If you can run it efficiently, it helps you, but it's a two-edged sword. The time you make up going down that hill, I swear you're going to pay a price. And I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but I ran 2:20:31 there. They had that race for about that same course for 20 to 25 years afterwards.
Yeah.
Nobody ever ran faster. And they had some good guys come out. There was a guy that ran for sub-4 out of California, and he came out 2 or 3 times because he kept looking at the race profile and going, I can smash this marathon.
Yeah.
Because you always think of, that's got to be good. And I think they found out, like I did, it pounds you pretty good. Well, I came back 2 weeks later, tried to run a 10K, and man, even though the pain wasn't there, after a marathon, my quads usually hurt for a good 2 to 3 days because of the damage I'd done to them. I was hitting the ibuprofen hard, and I'd still try to go run, which is like we always said, why bother? But we did because we were addicted or thought we had to. And finally the pain goes away and you go, well, okay, I guess I'm back. I think there's still residual.
Oh, yeah.
Well, who is the ancient marathoner? Jack Foster from New Zealand. He always said for every day you race, every mile you race, you should take a day of recovery. So like a hard 10K, you should probably take the next week. Light.
Right.
You should train, but not heavy. No intervals or hills.
Easy running.
Yeah. And if you do a marathon, well, gosh, that sounds like a month of easy running. Not like you're not going to train, you're laying on the couch, but no, you're going to go out and maybe do some cross training, do some cycling, swimming, some running, but just totally zone 2 as we call it now, where it's comfortable. Yeah, not us. I was probably trying to do a few track workouts right before that 10K to work on my leg speed or something. And anyway, about halfway through that 10K, man, when the wheels come off, you're just, it's kind of like you at the end of grandma's. I just want this to be over with.
Get it done with.
Anyway, so that was that. But then 2 weeks later, Twin Cities Marathon comes around. And because you had you always had a tough time. You wanted to do Twin Cities since you're a Minnesota boy.
Right.
But you also had an appointment with New York City and Alberto Salazar.
And, so Dunn, I look back at that and, Coach Squires, literally everybody after the race Salazar and I had at Boston, Coach Squires almost immediately said, Dickie, you're not racing against him again until the Olympic trials. He goes, there's no reason to. And I really wanted to run New York. And he was, my family, Coach Squires was, we're not doing New York. Well then, and I look back on this now. So then I get a call from manufacturers, Hanover Manufacturers.
They were the big sponsor,
big
right?
bank.
Yeah.
They were a big sponsor then. Well, they called me up and really wanted me to run it.
How bad did they want you?
Well, they said, we'll give you $10,000.
Okay.
Done. We were all scraping the barrel back then, trying to make a living, and $10,000 was a lot of money. And I kind of let it
Oh, well, hindsight's 20/20, Beard. You know
It
that.
is, and I kind of let it make the decision for me. I'm thinking, man, they're going to pay me $10,000
To show up.
to show up, and so I decided I'm going to run. I'm going to run New York, and so my training was going good. I could tell after the Thunder Bay races that I'd come down with that bad cold. So part of me is thinking, man, I'm probably pushing the training a little too hard. You know how that goes. You can kind of overtrain. You start coming down with a cold or
injury,
something like that. Well, then my left Achilles, started bothering me, and again, if I would have just taken a few days off, it probably would have been fine. But I thought, nah, it's nothing. It's nothing. So I get up to I commit to New York. So I remember it was 2 days before the marathon, and they have this big press conference. And Alberto's going for his, I think, third one, yeah. So him and I are at the table together, and all the media's there, and they're asking us all kinds of questions, and everybody was, they were fired up because they knew what happened a few months earlier at Boston, and so we get done with the press conference, and all the journalists there, they go, Alberto, Dick, can you come outside? We want to get a photo of you with your dukes up.
Yeah, like two prize fighters.
Yeah. And Alberto and I looked at each other. We're going, we're not putting our dukes up like it's a Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier fight or anything like that.
They just try to sell newspapers.
Oh, for sure. So the next day, I always did about a 4-mile shakeout run the day before the marathon. And I really thought it might come down to like it did at New York.
Yeah.
So I took a taxi to like the 22-mile mark, and I ran the last 4 miles of the course. And I remember when I finished there in
Central Park, yeah.
Central Park, yeah. I was hobbling. My left Achilles hurt so bad, and I just I stopped, and I walked back to the hotel, and I tried not to be limping. And I remember getting back to the hotel, and I took the trash can and emptied it out, and I filled it with ice. Mm-hmm. And I stuck my foot in there, and it was, took a bunch of ibuprofen, and so the next morning I get up, and it's tight, but I'm thinking, it'll be fine. And so, you start on the Verrazano Bridge. So you're basically going uphill, and then you go downhill. Well, by the time we got off the Verrazano Bridge, I think like the first mile and a half, 2 miles, you're on the bridge. And I come off the bridge, and we get down into the whatever borough that you're in at that point. Yeah. And already my left calf was like a rock. But I'm physically, other than that, I'm feeling good because we were running not super fast. We were running a little bit under 5-minute pace. Yeah. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging because I couldn't do that for one lap now, but it should have felt easy. Yeah. And it did. It felt good. Well, done. Pretty soon now, my right calf, I must have been compensating a little bit. That thing starts tightening up. And at about halfway, nobody put in a surge. And I was up there with Alberto and a bunch of other top runners. Yeah. Nobody put in a surge. We were running the same pace, but my legs, my calves, I was like running on sticks, and there was no bounce in them, and they just started slowly pulling away, and there was nothing I could do. And, the race turned out exactly like they were hoping it would, except
Gomez. Yeah.
It was Rodolfo Gomez that came down to a very close finish at the end. And I remember I hobbled in 2 hours and 18 minutes that day. And, of course, right away, they take me right to the media tent. And I've got cameras in front of me.
What happened?
That was it. What happened? And I never used it as an excuse. I didn't say, oh, my Achilles was bothering me. I just said, I felt pretty good until about halfway, and then I just kind of ran out of gas, and that was kind of started my kind of a downhill slide after that because of my left Achilles.
All right. I wanted to talk about my Twin Cities marathon, but now I'm kind of depressed.
Well, no, let's talk about that.
But no, we'll come back. Look, we'll come back to what happened then post New York, because I can't really remember personally what happened post New York. But 2 weeks before New York, you then graciously, because you have that radio voice and you have a radio. I shouldn't say you have a face for radio.
You're right. I do.
It's a terrible line, but I've heard people use that one.
It's
before.
true.
But you were always in demand as color commentary for
Yeah,
and you still are for WCCO.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know how the 1982 was the first
Very
Twin
first
Cities
one.
marathon instead of the Land of the Lakes marathon around those two little lakes. And they had recruited you or asked you, and I hope you got paid for that. I don't know what they. Do they do it for free, or don't you remember?
No, I think I got. I think I probably got paid like $500 or something like
they
that.
should compensate you for your expertise and time. But you were on color. You were the radio guy, and so we got to town the day before the race, and I'm sure chit-chatted with you. Karen and I stayed right at the starting line. I can't remember, the North Star Hotel or something like that.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, and nice place, and I think I got the room and entry for free. The fact that I'd run 219 at Houston
Right.
in 81 and ran Grandma's, and I'm trying to think of the name of the guy, the race director. Jack had a big black mustache.
Jack Moran.
Yeah, Jack Moran. Nice
Yeah.
guy, and I know
Oh, yeah.
he got me an entry and got me a hotel room there. And Callie, our daughter, who has just had her own daughter here about a couple months ago. She was a newborn. She was born in the end of May. So this is now, tell me, when was first weekend of October, I think.
Yeah, that first weekend in October.
Yep. And she's with us. I remember there's a picture of me laying on this hotel, and she's laying on my chest, and I'm listening to my heart, and a little baby infant girl. And so the night before the race, well, that morning then it was pretty nice. Got up, was able to just run right to the starting line, and perfect day to run. And the Twin Cities had really done a great job. The Norwegian background up there. They had brought in Inga Simonsen, Alan Zachariasen,
Yes.
some guy named Stig Roar Husby. I don't even know how they come up with those kind of names. Those Vikings have some interesting names.
Right.
And then all the local yokels. I mean, Al
yeah.
Sutherland, I can't even, I'll leave out too many people's names. Lloyd Ness, all those guys were there. And I was there, and I thought, I felt great. I was recovered. A month earlier did Black Hills, went to Thunder Bay, and my legs hurt so bad. But then I think I pretty much chilled.
Sure.
So I went up to Twin Cities with the idea of what the heck, it's going to be my pretty much last race of the year. Here it is, October.
Right.
And I don't know, I don't remember, but I made the mental decision to go out with the leaders. And so the gun went off, and the group, how that lead pack forms up, and I have no recollection of splits. I wish I did. Probably, a little over 5-minute miles, something like that. And I just jumped into the back of the pack and got caught up in that draft, kind of like the Peloton and cycling. And I actually have a nice photo that I found off the Twin Cities. If you Google you can get race results all the way back to 82 now.
Sure.
And there's a picture of the lead pack, and there's Inga Simonsen, Dr. Paul Rather,
Right.
Alan Zachariasen, me, Stig Husby, Al Zetter, all of us guys in the lead pack. Paul Mosling, if you remember, was off the front. He had taken
That's
it out
right.
sub 5 minute. He went solo early. And I remember I could hear your radio commentary. I think they had loudspeakers.
Well, we were the lead. We were the lead vehicle.
And you had speakers, so we could hear
Yeah.
what you were saying. And every now and then I'd hear my name, because you'd always go in, Mike Dunlap, South Dakota. and I was thinking, that's my bud Beards up there giving me a plug.
Right.
And so we went through in 107, I remember. Which
Dang.
isn't that, which is fast, but it's 2:14 pace. I'm happy, but I'm hanging. Ben put the picture up here if you're watching.
I saw
on
it. I
YouTube.
love the picture.
Yeah, it's a great shot. And Al Zachariasen, number 4.
Right, number
Inga
4.
Simonsen over Paul Rather's shoulder. And I know Inga was injured. I don't think he even planned to finish that darn race. I think they brought him over as part of the Norwegian contingent.
Sure.
I'm not going to use bragging rights that I beat him, fair and square, because I think I remember you had talked to him, because you guys are, after
Right.
81, you guys, I don't know if he learned any English or you learned any Norwegian by then, but you guys had talked, and I think you had
for
said
sure.
he wasn't fit, he had been hurt, But it's kind of like you, maybe he made the commitment that he'd come to the Twin Cities because the Norwegian people love him over there. And so he showed up and started the race. And so went through in 107. And I remember Paul Mosling, we could see him up the road, and Alan Zachariasen took off. He negative split that day because he ran at 212. So if he went out in 107, he came back in 105.
Dang.
And I remember he threw the hammer down and he left the pack. And Beards and I was right there when we saw him go. And there was that moment where you say, should I go with this guy?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I just ran 107 for the first half. And he's now, I mean, the guy changed his cadence. I mean, you could see he was moving. And I thought, no, oh no, just don't get greedy here. I could have went with him probably for a mile or two and then blew up spectacularly. But he went after Paul Mosling and caught Paul fairly quickly, and Paul was coming back to the rest of us. And then from like 15 to 20, it's kind of a blur. You're just kind of trying to keep running at a good pace.
Sure.
Well, Beards at about 20, 21, the wheels started coming off. Now, this is where you learn stuff, and if anybody's listening, going to run a marathon here in the near future. Again, I was not good at drinking, or definitely we didn't have goo that
Right.
They might have orange slices and bananas. And the last thing I was ever going to do in a marathon is grab a banana or an orange slice and try to eat that thing while I'm running.
No kidding.
And it sounds like a side ache.
They'd have to do the Heimlich on me if I would have tried eating something.
You'd suck it into your lungs. Anyway, and so I'm dying, and I'm bonking. I am not kidding. I've never really bonked in a marathon ever up until this point. But man, all at once, the lights are going out, and we're like at 21 miles. And when you're hitting the wall around 21, and it's still, oh my God, 5 miles sounded like they always say 20 miles you're half done with the marathon.
Done. And at 20 miles, it's by St. Thomas College. You go up that big hill.
Oh, and the hill put me up. That just punched me out.
Yeah.
And I am not kidding. And my stomach was giving me trouble. Why? I don't know. But, I felt like I needed to go to the bathroom. I started thinking, well, okay, this is not going well. I'm gonna stop and use a porta potty. I'm just gonna cash in my chips on this one. And I'm actually trying to figure out a way to get back to the finish line from there if there's a fast way. But I'm running along and looking for porta potties, but there's so many people lining the course that I couldn't really see any. And I actually remember I asked some people, there was like a couple, I go, hey, do you guys know if there's any bathrooms, like gas stations around here? And they were like, they're like looking at they didn't know. And and I kept, I was I don't want to say I was jogging, but I wasn't running hard. And I come upon Dr. Paul Rather sitting on a curb. I kid you not. And I saw him because we were running together earlier in the race. And I didn't know him personally. I knew who he was. And I said, I came up to him and I go, and he was sitting there and I go, do you know where there's a bathroom? I asked him that. And he goes, and he was like disgusted. He goes, I don't know where there's a bathroom. He kind of looking around and I go, and I kind of said like, I'm a nice guy. How you doing? And he goes, I'm done. I am done. He was sitting on the curb.
Yeah.
And he had this concoction, I guess he had made. He was a physician. And it was a combination of honey and tea. And I don't know what else was in there. Kool-Aid, and it was a concoction he had created for himself. And he goes, and I said, yeah, I'm not feeling it either. And he goes, here, have some, you want some of this? He goes, I'm done. You can have it. Yeah. And I took a couple big hits off this thing. And and it tasted great. It was sugar, honey, tea. I mean, it really went down.
Probably fired you up a little.
And I did, and I handed it. I think I gave it back to him, and I said, "Well, I'm going to keep running. I'm looking for a porta potty." Beards, I was running. I might have stopped with him for 15, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
And I was still running, and a couple guys had passed me in the meantime. I don't know what place I was in, and all at once, about 22 miles. Guys aren't catching me anymore, and I'm kind of seeing guys ahead of me aren't pulling away from me anymore. And I don't know what pace I'm running, 5:20, 5:30 a mile maybe. And I'm feeling good. And I swear, I don't know what was in that. It was the sugar, I'm sure. My brain, there's this theory in the lore of running. If you ever read Dr. Timothy Noakes' book, which is it's an awesome book, and anything you want to know about running. And he really believes the brain controls the body.
Oh, for sure.
Because they've done studies on marathoners when they say, oh, I hit the wall, my legs are dead, I have no glycogen left in my legs. No, they've actually had test subjects. They'll go and do muscle biopsies, believe it or not, like right post-race. Guess what they find? plenty of glycogen in their muscles.
Yeah.
And then they're going, well, why are my legs so heavy and I can't hurt, I have no turnover. They're just dead. And his theory is the brain controls everything, and the brain can only use sugar for energy to keep. And the brain's number one job is to keep itself alive,
right?
And you along with it, because you are your brain anyway. So if the brain sees your blood sugar and your glycogen blood level dropping, it's like, hey, wait a minute, you're putting me at jeopardy. And I don't know if you know what hangry is, but when you're hungry and your blood sugar's low, people tend to get a little moody and feisty and angry easily because their brain is not happy. Well, for runners, this is the theory, is when your brain's not happy, it's like this guy, if he keeps running at this pace, is putting me at jeopardy. I'm going to, and the term is de-innervate, I'm going to shut off some of those neurological pathways to their legs. Now, if there's some other biochemists or neurologists listening to this, they can chime in. And they actually, it's to slow you down. It's to slow you down. So that's why, I know Rich Benio talked about these ultra marathoners, and a lot of these guys use peppermints for their stomach.
Right.
Also, it's like a little sugar drip. I love a little peppermint in your cheek.
You bet.
And it's just a little constant. I think goo, there's only like 100 calories in a goo. If you look at the container, so you squeeze one of those down, and you don't usually get 100% of all of it out of the package, unless you're, a cyclist and you got time. But runners probably just get as much in as they can.
Right.
And that little 100 calories, it makes the brain happy. And the brain says, as long as it's got that little dose of sugar coming in, it's like, okay, we're fine here. Keep going if you want to. It's, and you've trained. I mean, you've done your long runs, and so it's not anything the brain hasn't seen before. And so I felt all at once, I'm back. And so like 23, 24, I'm catching guys.
Dang.
And then, I don't know.
And that's a good feeling.
Oh, it is. I mean, to come from, I hate to sound over dramatic, from dead to back to life. I mean, it was a startling transformation. So never count yourself out. Give yourself a chance. Find somebody that's got some sugary drink or some goo or something and give yourself a chance. And I did. And I came back alive those last 2 miles. And I'll never forget a nice kid named John Hogan. John was out of Mankato.
I remember John.
Was he out of Mankato, I think, or Minneapolis? He was
I think.
Good kid, nice kid. He and I were together, and we rounded the last corner, coming down that last straight towards the state capitol.
Yeah, by the cathedral.
Oh, man. And I don't remember Grandma's earlier that year, Tom Anzac. I really didn't have the spunk to try to outsprint Tom Anzac. He ran fast enough so I wasn't going to catch him, but I couldn't run harder to catch him, and he beat me by a second. Well, when John and I came around that last quarter, I beat John by 3 seconds, and I ran that last 200 meters faster than I probably ran any part of the whole race.
Dang.
So I ended up 8th, and I remember
8th overall, top 10.
And I remember, Beards, you were still doing radio, and you were so kind. Because I remembered, even though I wasn't in that lead group after about the halfway point, 14, 15 miles, you'd always say, well, the lead group, and you'd mention the guys in there, and you I was in the back, and Mike Dunlap, because I was off the back. But Beards Beards was, because my folks were listening, my cousins in Minneapolis, they were like, man, you were right up there. Yeah, well, according to Dick, I was. Well, we got done with the race, and I remember, when I finish a marathon, I am... your energy, I get cold, you're sweaty, and then you stop exercising, and I chill down. And I remember, I can't remember if we had sweats that they would have to go find them in your race number. They'd match your bag, and you'd go find something. But I remember going to this parking lot, and since I was one of the first few runners, there wasn't many runners there yet, and the sun was shining. It was a beautiful October day, and the pavement, the black asphalt, was warm. Beards, I laid flat down on that black pavement, spread eagle, on my back, and it was just like, oh my God, it was like laying on a heating blanket.
I bet.
And the heat it felt so good. And finally I got my bag and my stuff, and they had a VIP room at the finish, some local hotel. They said, yeah, the invited runners, anybody, I guess, that you could go access this, and they had food and drink and sodas. And like Lloyd Ness was in there, Al was, all the top guys were already in there, kind of getting refreshments and stuff. And Beards, do you remember I used to have a problem with my stomach?
Yes.
And when I'd finish a marathon, and it happened to me many, many times. And
I remember. Oh, Don, that happened to you a lot.
A lot. I'd get a stomach ache and diarrhea post race, and this wasn't because I drank. And my theory is, and I guess as a physiologist, I'm always trying to figure this stuff out. When you exercise intently, your body does a thing. It really tries to be efficient, and it'll shut down parts of you that you don't need to be using right now,
Sure.
like your GI tract. You don't need to be digesting food when you're running a marathon. Now, water, yes, you can be absorbing water and sugar through your intestines and all that good in your stomach wall. But as far as digesting solid food, no. So, when you're really putting in through training, your body starts making decisions, and it'll shunt blood away from certain bodily areas.
Sure.
And put it where it needs it. Heart, lungs, legs, kidneys, all that. Well, your GI tract usually gets shut off. And one of my theories was, man, mine would shut off to the point where it would cause me some really some gastric issues. Well, I got into this VIP, and I was cramping. My abdomen, it was it's like cramps, when you got to use the bathroom. And usually you no sooner get in there, you use the toilet, and by the time you got out, guess what comes back? The cramps, and you got to go again.
Right.
I basically locked myself in that damn bathroom in this motel room for about 45 minutes. And I remember every now and then somebody would come knock on the door is there somebody in there? And it's like, yeah, I'll be done in a few minutes. And they'd leave. And about 5 minutes later, I'd hear this, is there somebody in there? And I go, yeah, I'm just about done. And then they'd leave. They probably went and found a different bathroom is what they were doing.
Right.
And I finally got out of that place. And I know people love to hear bathroom stories. And so.
We all go through it.
Anyway, so that ended up my Twin Cities, which was really a highlight. I ran 3 marathons. It's on the website. I ran 3 marathons in 1982. I usually did 1 a year. I did 3 that year.
And Dan, what did you run that day?
Well, I ran 2:21:10 at Grandma's in June. I ran 2:21:08 at Black Hills in September. 1 month later, I ran 2:21:09.
Man, talk about consistent.
Did you listen to that? 2 seconds difference out of 3 marathons.
That's crazy.
It is bizarre. I keep thinking about that. And the first race at Grandma's was even pace. I remember it was a hot headwind day. I started conservatively, ran the middle conservatively.
Yep.
Got to the last 10K. That's when Mike just left me. And he said, you want to go? Let's try to catch people. I thought, nope, I'm just running steady because it was too hot. And I ran that just even pace. Black Hills started slow, 5:27 for the first 5 miles. Pretty comfortable pace. Then I put the smack down from 5 to 20 and then kind of limped in the last 5. So that was kind of an easy start, hard middle, slow end. Then Twin Cities go out at 107, come back with a 114, which again, but considering I was basically walking at 22 miles. And then these times are all, I guess that's my physiological ceiling that year was 2:21. Anyway, and so that ended I think I had one more like the turkey trot that Virgil Churchman I did that November. You were pretty much after New York you were no more racing.
I was done.
You're done.
Yeah, I was done. And then I started, New Balance sent me off to a couple different specialists to take a look at my Achilles. And, I was in a cast for a while.
I remember that.
They even sent me all the way. I swear I was putting her up to the North Pole. They sent me up to Kevin Ryan, who was a great New Zealand runner, and he worked for New Balance. He had a doctor friend from Australia that practiced, way up like north of Edmonton, Alberta, way up there in northern Canada. And so New Balance flew me up to this little town and had this doc take a look at me, and they put me in a cast. And I remember going out to the Honolulu Marathon in December with a cast on my leg, and because New Balance was one of the sponsors back then. So we went out to Hawaii for the Honolulu Marathon, and I remember New Balance had this big kind of a get-together for all the runners, and I remember I signed like over 1,000 of those posters one night. And I had this cast on. Well, they put it on too hard or too tight, so done. In the middle of the night, I wake Mary up, and I go, man, I got to get this cast off. So there was a hardware store still open. So I went across the street.
Don't tell me you got a hacksaw.
And I bought a pair of tin snips.
Start chiseling on it.
I tried to cut it off, and I couldn't cut it. Well, there was a hospital there. So about 1 o'clock in the morning, my big toe on my left foot was the size of my head. It was so big, and it was turning purple. So I go over to the emergency room. I go, you got to cut this cast off. They go, well, we don't have permission from your doctor. I go, my doctor's up in on an iceberg in
You got
Alaska.
permission from me.
I said, please cut this thing off. So finally they cut it off, and oh my gosh, my toe went back to normal size.
So just to follow up, after New York running, you couldn't. Did you even?
Yeah, after New York,
no more running.
I pretty much, that was the end, and I just was trying to get this Achilles healed up, and it was, and we can talk about that in the next podcast, kind of that whole deal leading into 1983. For me, 1983 was rough.
It was a rough year. All right, well, Beards, thanks for the. That's I kind of forgot about the cast. I remember you kind of telling me about that now.
God, well done. It's always, I tell you, I can't wait to do this again next week. We want to thank everybody for listening, and if you have any questions for Den and myself or comments about the show, please contact us directly at our website at beardsanddunpod.com, or you can sure leave us a comment on our Facebook, Instagram, or X, of course, formerly Twitter, all at Beards and Dun Pod.
And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit the like, comment, subscribe. And if you enjoy the podcast and you might be interested in supporting us a little bit, we do have some merchandise now available.
You bet.
Check that out on our site. Thanks again, everybody that might be listening to this. We appreciate you checking out. And Beards, it's always a joy and a pleasure.
Hey, Dan, and next week we'll talk about that new world record a little bit, too.
No doubt. All right, catch you later.
Have a good day, buddy.
Bye-bye.